Hey everyone, how's it going? I have for you today what I think will be not too long of a discussion video, and it's going to be a specific discussion point that I have, and what I want to talk about is whether or not Moby-Dick, the novel by Herman Melville, can be considered science fiction, because I've recently personally been growing really interested in science fiction, but mostly in film. I do want to get more into science fiction in literature, and I won't pretend that I'm extremely widely read in the science fiction sort of canon. I've seen a lot of science fiction films, so I do feel like I have some sense of what the genre is and what it does. But I thought that as a starting point for talking about whether or not I think Moby-Dick is science fiction, I would lay out two definitions that I found on the internet in 10 minutes of Google research. And the first definition is quite short and simple, and it's just from the Oxford Languages, I guess, which is just the first definition that Google gives you if you type in science fiction. And this is the definition that it gives you. So, quote, fiction based on imagined future scientific or technological advances and major social or environmental changes, frequently portraying space or time travel and life on other planets, unquote. And so that's my first definition. The second one I got from Wikipedia. This is just the first two sentences of the Wikipedia page on science fiction. So, quote, genre of speculative fiction that typically deals with imaginative and futuristic concepts such as advanced science and technology, space exploration, time travel, parallel universes, and extraterrestrial life. It has been called the, quote, literature of ideas, unquote, and often explores the potential consequences of scientific, social, and technological innovations, unquote. So, two definitions, quite simple. Maybe I didn't need to do that for you all. I'm sure pretty much everyone has an idea of what science fiction is. But so, you know, there are a lot of different directions you can take with science fiction, right? So I just pulled out some of the key terms from these definitions and thought about them in relation to Moby-Dick. So, is Moby-Dick about a technological advance? Not really. Yeah, there's nothing about that. I mean, maybe you can argue that somehow increases in whaling equipment or sailing technology made people more able to explore more at the time. I mean, that is sort of possible, but I don't think it's hugely driven home in the novel itself. Scientific advancements, not so much. Again, not driven home in the novel, really, even though I think it is sort of an undertone in the novel. You know, it was published not too long before, I think, The Origin of Species by Darwin was published, and there was obviously a lot of increase in scientific knowledge of the natural world at the time, and Melville does cite research on, like, fossilized whales and things of that sort. But again, I don't think any of that is central to the story of Moby-Dick. It's all kind of ancillary. Time travel, no, definitely not. Parallel universes, no, absolutely not, unless you think that the religious talk in the novel relates somehow to parallel universes, which I certainly don't. So, those we can easily sort of do away with. But then, the term from all these definitions that I sort of landed on as a possibility was extraterrestrial life, or life on other planets. You know, obviously, no one in Moby-Dick finds life on another planet, just, you know, obvious reasons. There was no time travel in the 19th century. But, you know, I did watch the video that the book chemist did on Moby-Dick the other day, and I will try to remember to leave a link to it. And in that book, he actually compares the Moby-Dick to the work of H.P. Lovecraft, who is not a writer I have really any experience with, but, you know, there's a scene in Moby-Dick where Pip, who is a younger member of the Pequod, who is at one point thrown overboard while hunting a whale, and basically he's floating there in the water, looks down into the depths of the ocean and sees, you know, these entities moving down there, and is driven insane by what he sees, and he's incoherent for the rest of the novel. In every scene he appears, he doesn't say anything coherent. And that's extremely Lovecraftian, because, as I understand it, again, I don't have much experience with Lovecraft myself, but a lot of what Lovecraft wrote about was this idea of cosmic horror, this idea of there being these, you know, these cosmic entities who are so much larger and more sort of cosmically important than we are, and the sort of dread that comes with realizing your own insignificance in the universe. And how that affects us as people. You know, that is an extremely anxiety-inducing thought for us. And Pip, you can say, maybe goes through that in that scene. We're not given specifics, but we're just told that he's driven insane, and he could be driven insane for many reasons. But that's one of the possibilities. And so I think that the model from like common science fiction tropes that is most perhaps useful for looking at Moby-Dick is this Lovecraftian element, and perhaps the idea of terrestrial life, of meeting a creature who is fundamentally different from you. You know, something like Contact or District 9, whatever. There's obviously a lot of different movies you can pick on. And Moby-Dick the whale himself is not extraterrestrial, obviously. He's from Earth. But I think he is extraordinary. You know, throughout the novel, it's the whales in general are just portrayed as sort of Lovecraftian beings, as sort of cosmic beings who've been on this planet for much longer than humans have. You know, there's a chapter about fossilized whales and how old whales are, and will probably also be on planet Earth long after human beings have died out, and perhaps will never go extinct. There's a chapter where Melville says that whales are so massive and difficult to kill and numerous that they will never go extinct. And of course that's painfully ironic reading it in the 21st century, knowing that there are a lot of species of whales that are endangered, but that's sort of irrelevant to my point. The real point is that they are portrayed as these almost godlike beings. They are, in a way, in the sort of theology of the novel, they seem to be almost like a stand-in for God or nature or the unknowability of the world. I don't know, they can be seen as a metaphor for many different things, but they're this cosmic metaphor. And Moby-Dick himself, the individual whale, is an outlier even among that species. You know, he's an outlier in terms of intelligence. You know, the Melville talks about his malevolent intelligence, right? His size, he's massive, of course. He's ferocious, he's aggressive, of course. He, you know, in those final chapters when Ahab and the crew are trying to take him down, you know, you really get the sense that Moby-Dick is just sort of toying with them, you know, that they never really stood a chance, you know, and also he shows his aggression in that, you know, he attacks. He's not like other whales. Every other whale in Moby-Dick flees, despite their size, despite the fact that they're much larger than humans, much older than humans, much stronger than humans, they always flee, whereas Moby-Dick turns around and attacks. And he, on top of all that, is this awe-inspiring color. He's white, you know, which is this, you know, there's a whole chapter about white, of course, in the book too, talking about how white is this, again, anxiety-inducing color. I mean, it's not even a color, really, it's the absence of all colors, right? And so Moby-Dick himself is, you know, a god among godlike creatures. And so he seems almost analogous to a kind of Cthulhu kind of creature. And again, I'm making all these references to Lovecraft without really having read much Lovecraft, but I do sort of get the idea with, like, Cthulhu. I should probably just read the short story, The Call of Cthulhu, because I get the sense it's not that long. But, you know, this idea of cosmic horror, the idea of humans' impotence and smallness in the face of the universe is contained in this story of Moby-Dick. And, you know, I think that speaks to the way that I define science fiction personally. And again, I'm mostly engaged with science fiction through film so far. I want to change that. I will. But the way that I define science fiction is, you know, you take some change, some aspect of our world that will be altered by a vaguely plausible scientific or technological or extraterrestrial occurrence, right? Like I said in those opening definitions, technological advances, AI perhaps, discovering life on another planet, and so on and so forth. And what science fiction does is it takes that and puts real people in the situation where they have to face that and looks at how they will respond and what that situation will say about the human condition. And I think that this is doing this, you know, it's taking a creature, the whale, who was probably a lot more mysterious to a lot more people back when Melville wrote this novel than they are now. We know a lot more about whales now, and we understand the natural world a lot more now than we did when he was writing. And so in a way, these were extraterrestrial creatures that a lot of people wouldn't have known much about. They were maybe a little bit like dragons. There was a time when people actually believed that dragons were real, and that somewhere they would find one. And you can imagine a medieval writer writing a similar thing about dragons. Maybe someone didn't. I just don't know about it. But yeah, it seems to me that Moby-Dick is sort of engaging with a lot of these questions that science fiction does. And on top of that, and this is maybe veering more into talking about fantasy than science fiction, but on top of that, what Moby-Dick does is something that a lot of science fiction and fantasy does. It creates a world. Herman Melville knew that a lot of his readers would not be all that familiar with the world of whaling or be that familiar with whales. And so he gives you everything you need to understand the world of whaling, right down to the equipment. He talks about how a whale is captured, how the oil is extracted, how the fat is taken off. He talks about harpoons. He talks about the lives of whales and how whales live, how large they are, whales in history. He gives you everything you need to know. He gives you basically the 19th century equivalent of what we now call info dumps in fantasy and science fiction, where an author is just sort of dumping a lot of information on you so that you can understand the world that they're trying to create. And he, I think, does it a lot better than a lot of other people, because he, unlike a lot of modern writers probably, writes in the absolute most gorgeous prose that any American has written in, I guess. And so he did do this. He created this world. In a sense, the way that I think of it is he wasn't content to just give you the Lord of the Rings. He had to give you both the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion in one work of literature, and that's what he was doing. And so, I think it's definitely possible that Moby-Dick could be seen as science fiction, or a combination of science fiction and fantasy. I'm not making a strong argument here. I'm not gonna stick a flag in the ground and say that this is true. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. If you're a science fiction reader, if you read Moby-Dick, or if you're just a reader who's curious about this sort of thing, let me know what you think. And yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that. Bye now.